Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE362, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Sic Semper Tyrannis, written by amphicoelias. Many say 4 horsemen will come to herald the end of times. In truth, they've passed through already, long ago, before humans even reached the stars. The 4 horsemen ruled them as kings. Their names were famine, war, pestilence, and death. The 4 horsemen were tyrants, cruelly ruling over their subjects against their will. This was their mistake. Tyrants must die. It is the way of history. So too did it happen to the 4 horsemen, for through their cruelty they created a resistance. The men of the pen and the men of the test. This is their tale. The first they slew was Famine, the slow. He delighted in long punishments. As he rode, the earth dried up beneath him. Livestock fled or died, and crops withered. His victims knew that without water or food, they would perish, but not quickly. Famine would watch and laugh on the hilltops as they grew ever more skeletal. Their bellies swelled, and they eventually died. For centuries, humanity had to suffer his rule. But then the men of the test came. They dug irrigation channels to bring back water to the soil. They developed pesticides to protect crops against disease. They even modified the plants themselves to be stronger, bigger, more efficient. Meanwhile, the men of the pen set up granaries and systems of trade. They connected the world through a large network, so that food could easily be transported from those who had too much to those who had too little. Together, step by step, they reversed the chaos famine had sowed. Every year, fewer people fell victim to hunger and thirst. Every year, fewer children grew up malnourished. Every year, famine grew weaker. Gradually and slowly, as slow as the torment he enjoyed inflicting on his subjects, he disappeared. In the end, his death was barely noticed. Famine was but a distant memory, and the first victory by men of the pen and the test went almost unappreciated. After famine, they dethroned War, the popular. He was not less cruel than his brothers, but unlike them, he could inspire. People cheered for him. Some even served him directly. The men of the sword. War would ride across the countryside, burning and pillaging, taking parents from their children and children from their parents. Yet, even as he did this to them, the men of the sword would praise him. They did not see his destruction. They saw only what they perceived as everlasting glory. War drew his power from these followers. As such, he was mostly defeated by the men of the pen. They wrote, composed, and painted, all with the purpose of opening people's eyes, to show them the true war, to show them not polished metal and triumphant victories, but blood-soaked cloth and mangled bodies. For ages they battled him. Every time the men of the pen had a small victory, War would lay down for a while, and men would forget. They would forget all they had learned, all their ancestors had seen. Then War would come back, and they all rushed to join his following. Often he would even sway some of the men of the pen. Eventually, however, War made a mistake. He overreached. He had become greedy and took too much at once. The men of the pen spread news of the horrors across the globe. The men of the test made sure that these would never be forgotten. The scale tipped, and War began to lose. Man began to make treaties, not war. They traded knowledge, goods, and culture, and as the world grew ever more connected, war became less and less feasible. The youth no longer joined the men of the sword, and the old and stubborn died. By the time the last former enemies shook hands beside a conference table, War was universally scorned. War is powerless now. His might came from the men of the sword, and the men of the sword are no more. However, he is not dead. Should men ever waver, should they forget as they did in the past, the world will once more be ruled by his cruel tyranny, and the men of the pen will have to battle him once more. Well, men of the pen fought war. The men of the test fought Pestilence, the ghastly. Pestilence in many ways took after his brother, Famine. But as a younger, he was less predictable. Men fled wherever he set foot, but never did they know their fate should they be too slow. Some died quick, painless deaths. Some suffered decades. Some did not die at all. Pestilence killed, tortured, and disfigured. But now he does no more. The men of the test chased him across the globe. They learned his tricks, his styles and forms. They cured his victims, all lessened their pain. Soon, Pestilence dared no longer set foot in large parts of the globe. He hid in the jungle, preyed on the weak. Only occasionally he would venture out. But the men of the test pushed him back. Every time they pushed on, soon the lost plagues had left behind outside his hiding spots were beaten. But Pestilence had learned from war. Men forget. They forget the suffering of their parents. They forget the cruelties long past. Who had ever died of measles? Was it not the men of the test who did that most harm? Soon these lies spread, and Pestilence returned. But the men of the pen would not allow it. They vanquished the lies. They retaught men what they had forgotten. Soon Pestilence retreated, but the men of the test chased him, and this time broke into his hiding spots. In a distant patch of a tree, far from his former subjects, he passed, once more, forgotten. The only one left was Death, the cunning. He was cleverer than his brothers, cleverer and subtler. He did not engage in flashy performances of power. Instead, he followed behind the other horsemen, lurking in their shadows, weaving himself into humans' lives. He became a background noise, a normal occurrence. Humanity had not even recognized him as a foe. One could not be Death. He would always be there. No, said men of the pen. Famine, war, and pestilence had perished. Their shadows with them. Now Death stood in the light. They saw him. All of you must go. Humanity turned to Death. Indeed, they thought, why did we tolerate him? This was the signal. The men of the test charged. Without his brothers to assist him, Death was weakened. Still, the battle was fierce. Death repelled every attack by the men of the test, but they dulled his blades. One by one, he tossed them aside, until eventually only his sword, Age, remained. Successive hits stretched it longer and longer, until after one final blow, it shattered. Death fell back, defeated. The men of the test towered over him, victors. They raised their weapons to end him at last. But the men of the pen held them back. Death need not die, they explained. Some may desire his service, to dull their pain, to take their grief. It is their choice. We must let them have it. The men of the test agreed, and so together they bound Death, so that he could no longer chase the unwilling. All of his blades, save one, were taken and destroyed. The last was sharpened to a finish, so as to be as quick and painless. And with its help, he serves humanity to this day. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.